Welcome to Money Matters. I am Emily Johnson, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director of Polaris Capital Advisors, and I am joined, as always, by David Crowell of Mortgage Network, and we are here to discuss all things where your money matters. So we wanted to kick off today with sort of an editorial, and then we will offer our editorials on the editorial.
Absolutely. Last week, I talked at some length about the tax plan, and we went back and forth about the tax revision, that I call it the tax cut, what Paul Ryan calls the generational change. It's a generation-defining change. Suffice to say, it's an important piece of legislation which is taking shape in the House of Representatives, in the Republican House of Representatives at the moment, and it's about to pass to the Senate, and it will be very much debated in reconciliation between the two over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So it's a very, very, very important topic, at least if you're having a show called Money Matters.
We figure it applies.
You know, I mean, growing corn might be important in Nebraska, but not on Money Matters. This tax plan is important on Money Matters.
It hits you in your wallet.
It hits you in the wallet.
Yeah.
So this is an editorial from Bloomberg News. So the editorial staff of Bloomberg News comes together every morning and publishes an editorial, which is much watched, just as the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal is much watched. It's neither far left, it's not far right, it's sort of our economic watchdogs, if you like. And this is what Bloomberg says about the tax plan. So then I'm going to throw it open, and Emily and I can
We'll wait for you to call in
knock
with your
each
questions.
other down on screen and pull hair and scream.
Maybe they'll be knocking at the door.
Yeah. So this is what Bloomberg says. Republicans in Congress appear to have reached agreement on several crucial points of tax reform. First, it should add to the budget deficit. Second, it should contain countless gimmicks to disguise its true fiscal impact. And third, it should make an insanely complicated tax code even more so. As both houses moved closer last week to passing a comprehensive new tax law, Speaker Paul Ryan heralded it as a generation-defining moment. He may well be right. It could take at least that long for his party to recover from this debacle. The best hope for the Republicans and the country is that the outcome remains uncertain. And then it goes on to describe the process of moving a big piece of legislation like this through the houses of Congress. So back to the editorial. Right now, House and Senate Republicans have converged on a reform that cuts the corporate tax from 35% to 20%. We've talked about that here before. It increases the standard personal income deduction, which is the one that everyone gets for being a breathing human being. So that's a cut to personal income tax. It increases the standard, it readjusts the personal income tax brackets and abolishes the alternative minimum tax and much, much more. That gets into technicalities. No need to stop right there for the moment. It's not that the plan is a timid plan. It would amend virtually every aspect of the tax code. It's that they lack any coherent theory of reform. In other words, it's not a tax reform. It's a tax cut for the corporations and the very, very wealthiest Americans, and then a whole bunch of other little bits and pieces to disguise the fact, or to make it feel like a total package. That's what's being asserted here. That's what's being asserted. Taken in isolation, the lower corporate tax is a good idea. The current rate is a lot higher than most other countries, which discourages investment and directs too much of managers' attention to tax planning. It forces profits offshore, etc. But a reform that favors the richest taxpayers, which this would, calls for offsetting changes elsewhere. For example, it could have had a higher personal rate for those at the very top. It could have closed the loopholes for carried interest. It could have closed the loophole for zero capital gains at death. You know, that's a technicality. It's a huge technicality that makes profit on real estate and profit on any held asset immune.
Well, as we discussed last week, there's lots of little pieces in there.
There's lots of little pieces. But
it's got to come from somewhere.
What's being asserted there is simply, great, if you're going to have a big tax reform bonus in lowering the corporate tax rate, you really responsibly have to claw some of that back from elsewhere. That's all that's being asserted. And that last list was just some examples of where it could be clawed back. Instead, loopholes for the rich seem about to get bigger. The rules on carried interest might be tightened, though with no great effect. However, income paid to the owners of pass-through corporations, on the other hand, would be taxed at a much higher rate than normal.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's huge. Income paid to the owners of pass-through corporations would be taxed at a rate much lower than normal. Overall, the emerging plan would add about $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion to the budget deficit over the next 10 years. Moreover, the plans are riddled with phase-ins, phase-outs, and other assorted gimmicks meant to disguise real impact. By design, this supposedly historic reform is a shape-shifting mirage. To comply with principles of fiscal conservatism, Republicans say that they uphold, their own reform would have to be scrapped almost as soon as it's passed, a fact they recognized in their own way by making it partly self-scrapping. In other words, a lot of the little tinkering pieces, not the corporate tax rate reduction, but a lot of the tinkering pieces get phased out.
Right. In 10 years or so.
Over the 10 years. So that's basically it. That's basically it. If you allow pass-through corporations, it sounds like a defense of the small businessman of America, the sub-S corporation that many of you have, or your sons and daughters have, or that any small business is likely to be advised by its attorneys to form a sub-S corporation, which passes through the income over to the personal tax return. If I read this correctly, and that the tax rate for pass-through income is lowered, then my present tax rate, which is 39.6%, would be reduced simply by forming a $400 corporation, David Crowell Inc., and having my mortgage income paid to David Crowell Inc., which would then allow it to pass through the sub-S corporation to me. My 39.6% tax rate would be cut to 20%.
Well, but it's a good argument, but that is also, number one, small business, which small business is one of the, if not the biggest employer. So that's number one. If you're going to discourage small business, then you're going to discourage jobs, is another way to look at it.
Sounds like a way of encouraging rich people. I'm already doing quite well, and my taxes are about to be cut in half.
But if you employ so many people, you actually can't have a sub-S. You max out at 99 employees for an S. And there's also other negatives when it comes to health insurance and other various deductions that are in there. So not everybody can just go set up a sub-S just for the heck of it. They have to have certain parameters around their business that enable that to be the case. That said, it is definitely one of the remaining loopholes, and I'm sure that that's one that's going to get hit next. But you didn't mention anything about the what's really getting people up in arms from the personal standpoint, the removal of sales tax, property tax as a deduction. Your only deductions are really going to be with these plans, and there are variations on them. There's the House plan, the Senate plan, and I guess that's the House plan that it's referencing.
It's mostly the House plan referenced there, and we'll get into some of those details in the second half.
But you'd also have to argue to some degree that the reason that they have these timelines and piecemeal is because they also have to cater to so many interests. I mean, right now it's only going to be that the Republicans, if at all, are going to vote for it. You're not going to get any Democrats to vote for it. So if there's any catering or pandering that's going on, it's through these, it's through the fat.
That's right.
And I know we have to discuss this more in the second half, so please stick with us. We will be right back.